consideration. Steve Moore saying he's still up for the fight, says the administration is still up to fight with him. Let's get the read on all this with Dan Geltrude, Jonas Max Ferris, Michelle McKinnon. Dan, what do you think of this?
Well, I think as long as Stephen Moore can count, he'll be okay. That's all this is about. It's about, will he have enough senators to get him through? And unlike Herman Cain, who early out of the box had 4 senators say it was a no-go, he was dead on arrival.
Right, because you make the assumption, I guess, all Democrats would vote against him, and then you can't lose more than 3.
And they will. And so far, no one has come out against Stephen Moore, so he's still in the game. Assuming, Larry Kudlow said, assuming he passes the FBI background check, they're behind him 100%.
All right, I think that there's a bigger issue here, and that is putting people on the Federal Reserve who don't either speak or typical Federal Reserve governors, district presidents.
Well, I don't think it's typical, because I actually do like the fact of having people on the Federal Reserve that are businessmen, that are businesswomen, that are not PhDs, because I think it's really important to have all sides here. I hate that the Fed is almost becoming politicized, because the moment that we start turning this into a game of politics, I think we're in trouble.
So wasn't the rap against Steve Moore, fairly or not, that he would do the president's bidding, that he would make this the political institutions? A lot of people still insist it is, but that he was a little too crazy.
Okay, first of all, if he was doing the president's bidding, that might be a good way to set interest rates. In fact, his main policy is to tie interest rates to commodity prices. That's actually very separate from the White House, because the White House doesn't control commodity prices. So actually, his main platform is a separate Fed from now. By
the way, he's back to track that talk about a gold standard, all the rest. But bottom line, he's seen as a bull in a china shop. I don't know if that's right or fair, but he doesn't fit the cookie-cutter mold.
Well, to his Kavanaugh point, he's getting a lot of criticism from the press. Already hates him. But the irony is the press hates him for all his women comments and not for his strange stance on how you set interest rates, where the criticism should be. Look, he's not up for the Supreme Court, where your opinions on women are relevant because of the things you're going to do. You're setting interest rates. So what's relevant is how would he set interest rates. Now, as we've talked on this show weeks ago, I have problems with setting interest rates based on commodities. I think that's a flawed system. It would have led you to raise interest rates into the...
Well, I did ask him if he saw inflation increasing, and I don't know what you think about this, Dan. It was a worry. Would you go against the president's wishes? No president likes interest rates going up, and hike rates in that environment. He said, of course I would, if that were the case.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he would or he won't, because he has changed positions over time, Neil. You know, the most troubling thing that I've seen him say is going back to 2008, when we were in the financial crisis, and he was saying that interest rates should be raised at that point, which ultimately he went back and said, you know, that I got it wrong on that
one. All the quantitative easing, which was a historically unprecedented move, but so he challenged things. But many on the Fed have missed things. Jerome Powell, you could argue, missed, you know, the impact of his own interest rate hikes that the president argues, you know, hurt the recovery. So people could be wrong. And
people are often wrong. Like, it's really hard to get it right, and we still don't know if we've gotten it right. I mean, some analysts say we have, some analysts say we haven't in terms of quantitative easing. I obviously think it has helped. It's hard to predict the future.
Well, the president is saying now, in retrospect, and he's going to have a big rally in Wisconsin tonight, talking this up. The economy is booming at 3.2% growth. We would have had even higher growth if the Federal Reserve had not been hiking rates. But his pitch is going to be, this is the wind at my back, at your back. This is what's going on. It's an enviable economy.
Yeah, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Neil. That's how I see it right now. I think the Fed should be sitting back and, quite frankly, doing nothing related to interest rates, because there's no
keep getting numbers like that one.
There's no reason to move interest rates at this point, in my opinion.
Really, Jonas?
If we had slightly lower interest rates, the economy would be hotter. That's true. That doesn't mean that these are good ways to set interest rates. The Federal Reserve is a flawed institution that's made mistakes, but these solutions are worse than what the Fed does. Going to a standard to set money policy based on gold prices is bad. Is he getting unfairly harangued, so to say, in the media? I think he would. If Warren Buffett has a 30-year history of making sexist jokes. They're funnier than Stephen Moore's bad jokes, but being a cad is not a reason not to be in charge of interest rate setting. Having a bad idea on how you set interest rates is not a good reason to be in charge of interest rate setting.
What do you guys think of this market backdrop? I mean, we're early on in the first quarter earnings period, but Most have been better than expected. Most thought this was going to be a contracting quarter.
Yes.
Looks like it'll be an up quarter, though not as up as prior quarters, but pretty impressive.
It's very impressive. I mean, I think March retail sales were the most impressive, up 1.6%. I mean, the consumer is really healthy. The consumer is strong. And I think that's absolutely going to move this economy forward.
What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think the economy is strong. The path that we're on right now, Neil, I don't see anything that's going to have a substantial change. I mean, outperforming expectations along the market and hitting new highs and new records all the time. The president's right. The wind's at our back. Let it ride.
The president, I would first like to know, where's that money going before we start piling more money in?
Well, it's a good question, Neil, as to where all this money goes that we tax, and it seems to just disappear into the black hole. You know, in 2018, President Trump made a suggestion, and he said that let's go with a 25-cent increase in the gas tax to put towards infrastructure, specifically towards infrastructure. Now, we haven't raised anything on fuel tax federally since 1993. Federal fuel tax is only at 18.4 cents. So we do have some room there.
A number of states have raised their own taxes.
Yes,
but
they
you're
have.
quite right. On the federal level, not.
The average state is taxing fuel at 28 cents. So there is some room there. Now, I don't like taxes, but infrastructure is critical. So we have to do something. I don't believe we're going to make cuts in other places to allocate the money to infrastructure. So I think the best thing we may be able to do is a fuel tax.
Well, what worries me is it's a slush
I think
fund.
it needs to be more bonds.
It gets to be a slush fund.
I honestly think it's financing. I mean, we have extremely long-term rates. The 10 years at 2.5, the 30 years at 3%. I mean, now's the time to potentially get more debt and finance this infrastructure. You get more infrastructure, you create more growth. That's going to help pay down the debt.
All right. So you argue that it would pay for itself.
Yes.
Just going ahead and paying
as long
for it
as
now.
we invest in the right infrastructure. Now that's really the big key.
History has shown us that the federal government is not really too good at doing what you said. I do agree. Look, if you look at any business, when they're going to have capital improvement that way, they're going to look at financing. So in theory, you're right from the standpoint of let's go about it that way. But the federal government isn't fiscally responsible
Well, a lot
enough.
of states, even New Jersey has this. They have these quasi-public private partnerships where you raise some money and then businesses will kick in some money after that. Hope springs eternal, but it usually doesn't deliver.
Yeah, I don't. Look, I think it's a myth that infrastructure pays for itself or education spending. Those are all Democrat myths along the lines of Republicans saying all tax cuts pay for themselves. That's not really true. You do have to finance part of it. Yeah, there are deals that have an obvious revenue source, like roads to an airport in New York City.
But people realize we have no money now, right?
Right, so we would need a tax. And I think actually Trump would be more open to that. I think actually Republicans hold him back from some of his plans because they don't like how he would finance them. And they're always reminding them, as we heard in the Woodward book, well, you're a Republican, you can't do that. I think Trump's actually
Well,
more
they're
open
fine
to
ones to lecture anyone on fiscal propriety, right? I mean, they've sent deficits soaring. And
right, but as long as you're not raising taxes on
$1 trillion one to him and he grudgingly signed off it, I'm not giving him a pass. But I'm certainly not saying Republicans are the white knights here.
I would blame the party more than him for this expanding deficit because they don't care what happens as long as you don't raise taxes.
Well,
on your
this happened with him controlling the White House and them controlling the House and the Senate, and they ran up debt at a pace so far faster than Barack Obama and the Democrats did. So I don't trust either party to address it. Leaving that said, this could be political cover as well, right?
Absolutely.
If you can both say, we met, we talked, we discussed infrastructure, we discussed this so that we're not all focused on Mueller hearings or, the wall and all of that to say that we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
And Trump did say that he wanted infrastructure. So, I mean, he usually likes to say that he's good on what he says. I mean, and he absolutely promised infrastructure. So,
well, the wall is
we'll
infrastructure, right? The wall's infrastructure.
Yeah, I guess you could say it is, but I don't think we're going to be driving on the wall. So I think really with our bridges and roads falling apart.
But if we improve the grid and make the grid more efficient, all that, that's part of that too, right?
Sure it is. Look, Neil, here's what the compromise is going to be. Both parties are going to agree to spend more money and increase the national debt. That's not compromise, but that's compromise in Washington.
All right. We shall see. All right.